Andrea, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
Thank you.
I am so excited about what you're going to share because I think that so many people don't realize that the majority of what our brain processes is unconscious and how the built environment impacts that. And so you are an architect, you are the co-director of the Masters in Neuroarchitecture, and I think you're going to have a very unique perspective, but I want you first to introduce yourself a little bit so that the audience gets a better feel of your unique intersections.
Okay, thank you, Lydia, for having me here. It's a real pleasure. And as you said, I am an architect, but I've been for, I think, more than 13 years involved with neuroarchitecture. I'm really passionate about this topic, and I think it's really important to have a better understanding of all the unconscious process that are involved in our relationship with the physical environment. And as you said, I am a co-director of the master at Elisava, together with Alba and Julia. Uh, I, I am the founder of NeuroAU, a platform where we offer online courses and articles about neuroscience for architecture, always with this architecture or practitioner perspective on the topic. So how we can translate, how we can make all this knowledge more tangible to improve design reasoning. And this is something I'm going to talk about today. And I'm also an advisor for AMFA, the Academy of Neuroscience for Architecture.
Great. Well, let's dive into cognitive resilience. Maybe you could start with just explaining so that we all have a definition of what cognitive resilience really even means.
Yes, that's the idea. To bring some light on what this means and why this matters.
Hmm.
Usually, I start talking about our relationship with the physical environment, then I will focus on what is cognitive resilience, and then I will get back to the relationship with the physical environment. But usually, as we were discussing before this video, we tend to think of the effects of the physical environment on us in more immediate or short term, or on the short term. So, for instance, when I enter an environment, I feel like this, or I like it, I don't like it, I feel colder, I feel warmer, I feel maybe a little bit more creative or more shy. These are all short term changes that are really important and that are studied by neuroscientists and environmental psychologists. But a point that I think is really important also for us to discuss is related to the long-term effects that architecture can have on us, because these are much more difficult for us to perceive because we
Hmm.
adapt, we get used to things that maybe are at some level harming us
Hmm.
without us even realizing that. So I think that's one of the very important contributions of neuroscience is to help us understand also these long-term effects of architecture on our cognitive health. So, talking about cognitive resilience, as we are entering the topic of cognitive health, it is basically it is the capacity to maintain, recover, or adapt our cognitive functioning, so we can keep with our daily activities and our quality of life. This is the basic idea behind the term cognitive resilience. So, in our modern context, our contemporary context, I think this matters even more because it helps us to, cognitive resilience helps us to maintain cognitive function even when we are facing challenges such as stress,
Hmm.
aging, disease like Alzheimer's, for instance.
Hmm.
So, in our context today, in which our urban population is growing, population in the whole world is aging. So, we have an increasing number of older adults. We live longer, so we have a greater life expectancy. I think all those elements, together with information overload that
Yeah.
we get, and chronic stress that is growing, I think all this together, they bring challenges to
Hmm.
our cognition. And then talking about cognitive resilience becomes even more important.
I read a
And
book.
yes, go ahead.
I read a book by a neuroscientist that was focusing on aging specifically. And when he talked about cognitive reserve, one of the kind of examples he was giving is that it's a buildup of capacity in the brain. And an analogy that I find very helpful is like if you were a ballerina, you would have postural reserve. All your life, you would have great posture because you're a ballerina. And then, therefore, as aging would happen to you, where you've got muscle loss, bone loss, etc., you would be better positioned because of your postural reserve to fare better. And so that was an analogy to the cognitive reserve, where you use your brain more and therefore you're more protected as natural aging happens.
Yes, that's a very important detail that you brought to the discussion, which is that this is not fixed, and this is something that we can strengthen across the lifespan. And I love the analogy with the ballerina. I usually do an analogy with our muscles and going to the gym. Like, it's not one day that you go to the gym now that will really build up your cognitive resilience, your
Hmm.
cognitive reserve, but or in this case, in the gym, it's not one day that you go that will really make you strengthen your
Yeah,
muscles. But
yeah,
if you go like
consistently.
frequently, consistently, then you start to building muscles. And
Hmm.
in a way, our brain works similarly to our muscles. So if consistently you practice behaviors and habits that help that support cognitive resilience, then on the long term, you will feel the effects, just like with aging and muscles. Because if you go to the gym and then when you're aging, you age stronger and faster and with a better balance if you train your body. And it's a very similar thing with our brain. If we train our brain throughout our lifetime, across the lifespan, we become more resilient in terms of cognitive functioning.
And I just
And
want to give, sorry, some concrete examples what training our brain is. So in the book that I read, the neuroscientist talked about learning languages, reading books, having novelty thinking, critical thinking, and stuff like that. Do you have other examples? And I understand you're going to get to how architecture can help on that.
yes, yes, I do. That's my next slide. But just before we move to that, I just wanted to explain this graphic that I
Yeah.
added here, because I think this also helps to illustrate uh, the power of cognitive reserve. And I've been talking about cognitive resilience and also cognitive reserve. I just want to make sure that we understand that they are different terms, but they are talking about the same thing. So cognitive reserve is a much more technical term coming from neuroscience and cognitive neuroscience, but it is the ability to maintain functioning, or better, to have an efficient utilization of brain networks. Because in neuroscience, we have two different concepts: brain reserve and cognitive reserve. So brain reserve is a much more passive way of reserve, because it's related to the brain structure. So the thickness of the brain, the volume of the brain, the amount of synapses and neurons. So it's much more structural. And when we talk about cognitive reserve, it's a little bit different, because with brain reserve, we're talking about the hardware. With cognitive reserve, we're talking about the software. So how we use these resources, and we can have the same amount of resources, but one person can use it more efficiently. And therefore, this person has more cognitive reserve. And here in this graphic, what you can see, and I think it's really, really interesting, is how two people with dementia, with Alzheimer's, one with lower cognitive reserve and another one with a better level of cognitive reserve, you can see that the moment in which the person starts to show the symptoms is different. So you have the same amount of development of Alzheimer's, the same level of development of Alzheimer's, but maybe a person with less cognitive reserve will lose cognitive functioning earlier. So will be less resilient to still function well, even with the presence of Alzheimer's. And there are many interesting studies about this. For instance, the NUN study that was conducted by David Snowden, and he was interviewing very old nuns every year and applying cognitive tests. And after their death, they had donated their brains, so he would be able to examine the brains. And when he was comparing the brains of some of them, he realized that just a few, not all of them, but just a few, they had a high punctuation in the cognitive tests, so they were doing well cognitively, like showing nothing wrong with their cognitive functioning. But when he examined their brains, they had levels of advanced Alzheimer's. So it didn't make any sense because they were not showing this. And then looking back to their behaviors, and then I'm bridging with your question that I said, next slide, he realized that education was a key factor. So the nuns that had studied for more years, had studied longer, they tended to have more cognitive reserve, more cognitive resilience. And then even in the presence of Alzheimer's, they were not showing the symptoms.
So if I understood correctly, their cognitive reserve gave them cognitive resilience, and cognitive reserve is more about neuroplasticity, because you said when they opened the brains, there was advanced physical visibility of dementia, but in practice, they didn't have it. So that's the neuroplasticity part. Is that correct?
Yes, but there are two different kinds of neuroplasticity. One that is structural and one that is functional. So brain plasticity and brain reserve is about structure. So yes, more synapses, so more connections between the neurons, or even more neurons in some areas of the brain that we are able to, for instance, have neurogenesis, which is a kind of neuroplasticity related to the production of new neurons. So we have brain plasticity and we have cognitive plasticity, which is the flexibility in terms of how you use the resources you already have, the structural resources you already have. So you have all the connections, but maybe you're more flexible in terms of this connection is no longer working, your brain can use an alternative one. Or if you didn't practice, you didn't study, you didn't practice physical activity, you're too stressed, you didn't sleep well throughout your life, maybe this will change the software. So how you use the structural resources you have in your brain.
And that's the functional part.
Exactly, that's the functional part. Yes, so you have the structural one and the functional one.
That's very fascinating. Thank you for expanding on that.
Thank you for the question. And here, finally, moving forward to the next slide, in which I listed a few of the behaviors or activities that are associated with this, I don't think this is the best word, but this lack of training or practicing that leads to building stronger cognitive reserve. So for each one of them, so we have education, social engagement, occupational complexity, stress regulation, diet, meditation, sleep, and physical activity. And for each one of these, they are influenced by the physical environment at some level, not equally and not entirely influenced by the physical environment, but the physical space in which we are, that we are occupying, directly influences these activities from education. So maybe there are studies, for instance, about light in the classroom affecting the amount of information that students can remember later, can learn of
Mm.
something they are studying. So there's this, or even there's the fact that if you don't have a comfortable enough space to study, it won't be so pleasurable to study. You won't feel like it won't be so interesting. And maybe this can lead to different choices,
Mhm.
different relationships with learning and education.
Mm.
Um, so I'm not saying it's a direct effect, but it's indirectly, uh, the built environment is always at some level influencing our experiences. From we can think of physical activity, for instance. We have nowadays we discuss a lot more about active design. So design strategies to foster physical activity, so that in the daily life, I'm not talking about you choosing to go to the gym, which is also important, but I'm talking about every time you use the subway, you're choosing to take the staircase instead of the elevator or the
Mhm.
escalator. Um, so there are different design strategies that we can think that can make people much more active. Urban design as well, depending on how your city is, the human scale of your neighborhood, the presence of nature and shadows for
Mhm.
you to find more comfort in a sunny or hot day. All these elements will influence also the perception of safety. How much you will choose to go walking to your destinations or cycling instead of taking your car or a bus.
Mhm.
So sleep, again, the level of darkness in your room will affect the quality of your sleep, and also the kinds of light that you're exposed to, not only hours before going to bed, but also in the morning, will
Mm.
affect the quality of light, the quality of your sleep at night. And well, sleep has been directly associated with brain plasticity and learning specifically. So it's during the night when we are sleeping that we consolidate long-term memories.
Mm.
And it's also during sleep that the brain kind of cleans itself from toxic substances that accumulate during the day. And for
Mhm.
instance, on the long term, when they are accumulated, these substances can lead to the development of Alzheimer's.
Mm.
So sleep is really important for us to kind of get rid of these substances every night so we don't accumulate them on the long
Mhm.
term. So we can kind of, it's like a domino effect. So you understand that this is connected to that, and then like little pieces, little pieces. And what I mean is architecture is not a direct determinant of cognitive resilience, but as we're seeing with these examples, it acts as a mediator of our everyday experiences and behaviors that are themselves associated with cognitive health across the lifespan.
I would even add, you said that it's a mediator, but I think it's also an enabler.
Mm-hmm.
So if we think about sleep, some people have walls in their buildings that allow a lot of sound to come through, and that can be very disturbing. And then the light piece, like you said, that is also an enabler. So you could have certain kind of LED lights or incandescent lights that are more prone to helping you instead of waking you. But the same thing with physical activity, your built environment dictates how physical you are. So even if you want to be physical, if you live in a place that is very far away, there's nothing to walk to, you by default aren't going to be able to walk as much. You would have to have a treadmill at home and, allocate time versus somebody who lives in an urban environment where it's just they walk every day to get their bread, to go to the post office and all of that. And social engagement, I think that's something that's really important right now because of this social isolation pandemic or epidemic. We have a lot of loneliness, and There are many reasons. However, one reason is the lack of third spaces. And that's an enabler for people hanging out and spending time together in person. So anyway,
Uh-huh.
so I see how it can be really more than a mediator, but an enabler.
Yes, yes, I agree with you that it is an enabler, and we need so when we are designing and thinking about the spaces we will offer and the spatial features, usually I see this among my students and in lectures that I
Hmm.
give. Usually, we tend to think a lot of spatial qualities as just a spatial quality. So, what color should I have on my
Yeah.
wall, or this vase of plant, or the size of my window? But then we don't think about what these qualities are enabling
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
not. And not only enabling, but I think fostering. So I think they are enablers, but
Hmm.
also foster. They can even, you mentioned like maybe your physical environment will not even allow you to be more active. You
Yeah.
want it to be, and it will not allow you. This
Hmm.
is one thing for us to consider. And
Hmm.
the other thing is maybe people are not even paying attention about their bodies and if they are active or not. But with subtle spatial changes, we could foster, not only allow people to do if they want, which
Yeah.
is key, I
Yeah.
agree with you, but also foster people to do it because
Hmm.
it's more interesting, because it's nicer, it gives a different, interesting, and more comfortable experience.
Hmm.
So I think we tend one strategy for us as designers is to shift the focus to spatial qualities just for what they are, but
Hmm.
for what the set of spatial qualities can enable and also foster.
Hmm. This is like the example you gave about making the stairs interesting, and that encourages people through novelty and interest to use them.
Yes, I've been part of research in Singapore in which every week we changed the design of a staircase in an office building. And we had sensors counting the amount of people using the staircase. And we saw that, yes, the novelty effect is something really important, of course. So with the changes, we had an increase in the
Hmm.
number of the staircase, but also something interesting that we realized with the study, because each week we would have a different intervention, but in
Hmm.
some weeks we would have the staircase as it was before.
Uh-huh.
And between interventions. And
Yeah.
we realized that even in these weeks between interventions, the number kept higher than before the
Before.
beginning. So maybe we shifted the attention of the users to a design element that was there from the beginning, but we are so used to go everyone together to the elevator that we don't even pay attention to it. This is a hypothesis.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
would need more funding to keep the study going, to measure the novelty effect and
Hmm.
also measure this kind of remaining effect even in
Hmm.
the weeks without
Hmm.
intervention.
Hmm.
But still,
Yeah.
it is interesting to think about shifting attention through light, color, or novelty.
Yeah.
So ephemeral changes, maybe shifting the attention to elements that will afford healthier behaviors, not only physical activity, but healthier behaviors in general.
Hmm. That's nice.
Um, so, uh, so as we were saying, architecture can support or undermine some of these behaviors. And I think one thing that I like to propose to my students when we are starting a design process is to start from the behaviors that we want to foster, not only to enable,
Hmm.
but also to foster with our design solutions. And science can really bring a lot of information in terms of choosing some of the behaviors. Of course, some of them will be associated with, I don't know, the goals of my client. So if it's a
Hmm.
restaurant, he wants people to go there, to stay there for longer,
Hmm.
so these are some of the behaviors. But we
Hmm.
can think of other behaviors that are associated with long-term cognitive health. So we start
Hmm.
from the behaviors and then we think of design qualities, spatial qualities that can together help
Hmm.
us
Hmm.
achieve the goal of fostering these behaviors that are really, really important. So I think we need to have a better understanding of which behaviors or what are the effects of each of these healthy behaviors. So which are the effects and which are the spatial qualities that influence them. For instance, just to give you an example of how we need to better understand the effect of light, I said that not only the light from hours before going to bed will affect quality of sleep and the darkness, of course, of your room, but also if you're exposed to natural light in the morning, this improves your quality of sleep at night. So if you're designing an office building, you usually, at least I didn't think I was influencing the sleep of the users when I was involved in the design of a workplace. But we are, because we're shaping the amount of natural light exposure that people will have with the windows, with the layout where they will sit far away, closer to the window. And this will influence their quality of sleep. So we really need to expand our understanding of how our design choices can influence these important behaviors or regulation. When we talk about stress regulation, it's not necessarily a behavior, but it's how we regulate our internal activity. So it's also a key element for well-being.
That's great. I totally see how the circadian rhythm plays a role in architecture. So that's good.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so what changes for designers? First of all, as I just hope it was clear that cognitive resilience emerges through our ongoing interactions with the diverse spaces we inhabit.
Yeah.
From this perspective and from everything we've been discussing, I think the main changes for designers with this kind of knowledge involves design reasoning and the framework of design. So, for instance, we expand our framework when we learn more about what science investigates, not only neuroscience, but of course neuroscience as well, but science in general, what we can learn from scientific research and bring to our design practice. This really expands our understanding. For instance, an office can affect like the quality of sleep, and so many other examples like this one we can think of for different design decisions, so different spatial qualities or spatial affordances, which are these behaviors that are enabled by the physical environment. So there is this expansion of the framework because now we include scientific knowledge in this discussion.
Yeah.
And I think also we change the design reasoning and design framework because with all this information, we realize that we shouldn't be so spatial centered, even though we are designing the physical environment, the space, but it's really, we will not understand the space if we don't understand the relationship of people with their surroundings. So I think this is a key step, shifting the attention from just the space, the colors, the layout, the furniture, all these elements, to relationships, the relationship of people with their surrounding. And I think I also use this term a lot, human-centered design, but still I don't think this is enough, because then this shifts the focus from spatial-centered design to human-centered design. And what I'm proposing here is the relationship between people and the environment. So I would even, I haven't found, but I would think of an alternative name that involves the relationship of people with their surrounding, so that we are not only looking that way or this way, but more in between, and we can see really how one is influencing the other. And then as I said before, this also shifts the attention from spatial qualities to affordances or the behaviors and that are enabled and fostered or not by the physical environment. So this shifting the attention from space to relationship allows us to understand the importance of thinking of the spatial design as designing the conditions for certain behaviors to happen more or less or not happen at all. So I think this is an element. And finally, and I will get to a point that we discussed when we first had our meeting, the idea of a diet and so on. I will get there from this point. I think there is a change of framework, because usually when we design in a more traditional way, we kind of design closed systems, like I'm designing this building or this room or this neighborhood. And we think of that thing that we are designing, so more as a closed system formed by different parts that are interconnected. But I think to really be able to support cognitive resilience, as I said with this sentence on the slide, it emerges through our ongoing interactions with the diverse spaces we inhabit. If we're designing for cognitive resilience, we should see the spaces we design more as an open system connected to the other systems that people inhabit. And I will just, so it is not too abstract, I will just give one example with something that happened during the pandemic.
Okay.
Well, usually we think of our homes, forget about the pandemic, we think about our homes as the place where we go to relax. And sometimes we're at work dreaming about going back home and having some rest, some peace, and so on. But because the home is part of a very complex system of other spaces we occupy, like the workspace or the school or the city or the restaurant where you have lunch or the place you go to have a drink with your friends. So your home is part of a much more complex system. What happened during the pandemic that we had to stay only at home. Not only we lost control of the choices of spaces we would be able to go, which is a key element, perception of agency.
Yes.
But also this complex system of such diverse environments was reduced only to the home. So then it became a closed system and much less complex. And then that same space that helped us to relax and really like recalibrate to be ready to occupy the other spaces and engage in other activities. That same environment, when we changed the system, affected us differently.
Yes.
So as designers, I think we really, as much as possible, we need to understand the open system, the diversity of environments that people occupy, so that when we are designing this specific environment that is part of a bigger open system, we understand what it needs to have to really recalibrate and offer balance to the entire system. So for instance, if I live in a city, like I used to live in São Paulo, I am Brazilian, in São Paulo, there are not many opportunities for you to connect with nature there. There are a few, but you need your car. If you don't live nearby, you need your car, and they are crowded in the weekend. So it's really like complicated. So for someone who lives in a city like this and lacks contact with nature, which is also a very important element for us to regulate our stress levels, for instance, and for cognitive restoration. So for a person that has a relationship with a system that lacks that element, when I am designing her home, the home of this person. Maybe this person will be in more need of natural or biophilic elements than someone that is living already in a very in a place that offers a lot of opportunities to connect with nature. Same with physical activity or with other of the behaviors we listed before. So I think the pandemic helped us to see how it's not that the space we occupy is absolute in terms of how it will affect us. Its effects will depend on how much time we spend there. So it's relationship. It's about the time we spend there. It's about what we are doing there. So before the pandemic, you're using your home just to be with your family or to relax and rest. And now, and during the pandemic, you were using it to work, to study, and to do everything you had to do.
Right.
So the relationship changed. The time of occupation changed. And the whole system changed because it became the whole system, because you're not leaving the home for anything.
Right.
And then bridging this to what we discussed the first time we met, I made an analogy that I think is helpful to understand how this could change design practice. So I think in a way, designers have a similar role as nutritionists. So as a nutritionist, you know what everyone usually needs. As we are members of the same species, we need to eat protein, and we need hydration, and we need vitamins, and so on. So you have an idea. But of course, the same diet will not be offered to everyone. So there is a context, a sensitive element. Usually you ask your patient like, oh, what is your lifestyle, your background, health problems that you have, behaviors, what you like to eat. This makes a huge difference because you're not going to say like, eat something that the person hates. So you have an understanding of what are universal needs, shared needs, but what is contextual, so that you can really offer as the diet for that person something that really works for their goals, their needs, their context, their condition, and in a way. You need to understand the context. So for instance, if people are eating a lot of sugar and there is an imbalance, you need to kind of understand the open system and then cut what is in excess to bring some balance with what you're going to propose. So I think, yes, this analogy of a diet and this kind of tailor-made solution based on understanding the system. So maybe you don't need to eat protein in your breakfast, but understanding the whole day and the needs that we share as members of the same species, we understand that, maybe for breakfast, you don't like to eat protein, you don't need to, but then in your lunch, you will find a way to offer balance to the system. I don't know if this was confusing or not. Let me know.
I think what I'm hearing is, so if we take your nutrition example, a nutritionist will do your blood work and then understand your context, your preferences. Do you eat meat? Do you eat fish? Are you vegan, etc.? Do you have any food allergies? And then they're going to look at what the human body needs, such as the macros, the protein, the carbs, and the fats. And then say, great, based on the way that you like to eat, let's say you're a pescatarian, and you have some allergy to mushrooms, like this is kind of what I recommend. But also it's about the way that the person can maintain the diet. So like you could have the perfect diet, but not be able to exercise it because your life is too busy. And so the nutritionist should also help out in that sense. And so if we take that analogy of a customized, personalized diet and we take it to the built environment, I think the example you had given me a while back about somebody working from home. So, like if a human needs, the macros of protein, carbs, and fat, then a human in a built environment requires a certain type of light, a certain needs movement. And so there's some key things there. And if you could tell the story, I think it's going to drive the point home of the person who works from home and
Yes,
how much
yes.
time they do that and why that's important and what you would do with the design, because I think that helps explain what the diet for the home is based on the person.
Yes, perfect. So, for instance, connecting to the example of the pandemic in which we were working from home and staying home all the time.
Mm.
Before that, before the pandemic, with our regular lifestyles, usually we would leave home to go to work or to go
Yeah.
to school, to meet a friend,
Hmm.
to walk in the park, travel, and so on. So you would have a much more balanced diet. But once you have to work from home, be it during the pandemic or even now, for instance, I work from home mostly, uh, you're spending less time outdoors because when you have to go to your workplace, you either leave home and walk to your car or walk to the subway station or take the bus. So you're being exposed to other people, you're being exposed to natural light, to
Hmm.
nature elements. You see the sky, you see a tree on your street,
Hmm.
and you see diversity because you're changing environment. So there is a huge diversity of multisensory stimuli that you will be exposed to when you're walking on the street and then taking the elevator in your office and then reaching your workspace and so on. So uh, when a person works from home, we can see that this diversity in the diet becomes much more restricted in terms of a spatial diet, because then there's not a lot of diversity because I don't know, my home has, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 different environments, and that's it. I don't have a lot of opportunities for social interaction,
Hmm.
maybe only with the person that lives with me, but then I don't meet spontaneously a colleague and, oh, you're here today, let's have a coffee. So
Hmm.
you lose this kind of spontaneous meetings that happen when you're on the street, when you're at school, university, work, and so on. Um, so you miss nature, you miss natural light, multisensory diversity and changes of stimuli, opportunities for social connection, diversity. So all these become unbalanced. It's like even if you have a healthy diet, even if you live in a very well-designed home,
Hmm.
it's like, okay, maybe lettuce and yogurt are healthy, but if I'm eating only lettuce and yogurt, that's all the things I eat for my entire day for weeks. That's not healthy at all.
Hmm.
So even if your home has healthy design elements, if it is in an unbalanced way, it is not enough. So this shift of attention during the design process to the system in which the person is inserted to allows us to see these kinds of imbalances so that when we are designing, we can offer spatial qualities or affordances that help people as much as possible to find a more balanced spatial diet, considering all these kinds of stimuli or behaviors that we need to keep
So
our cognitive health.
you mentioned quite a few things that they were missing, the person who works from home. The sensory motor cortex, the natural light, the spontaneous interaction, all of these things. Could you now tie all of the things to cognitive health and then show us what your solution is for that person to fix that?
Okay, so tying that with cognitive health, for instance, we mentioned that people would not have a lot of diversity in terms of multisensory stimuli, and novelty would also be lacking because you're all in the same environment. And there are different studies conducted about a term that we didn't use here, but it is called spatial enrichment or environmental enrichment. And there are many, many studies conducted, in this case, mostly with mice in cages, investigating which spatial qualities or affordances would allow for for better brain and cognitive plasticity. So in the end, they would measure the cognitive performance of mice after being exposed to these enriched environments. They would measure their cognitive performance and later examine their brains to understand plastic structural changes in the brain. And they realized, for instance, that novelty of stimuli was a key element to obtain a higher level of brain and cognitive plasticity. So novelty. Physical activity, I didn't, we mentioned the Singapore study, but we didn't mention the huge amount of studies about physical activity affecting brain plasticity. So it's a key element for us to support not only our muscles and body health, but also cognitive health. There are many studies connecting it to synaptic plasticity, so changes in the connections of neurons that are strengthened or created due to practice of exercise, but also neurogenesis, so the production of neurons that happens only in just a few areas in the brain, also being fostered, promoted by physical activity. And when you're, for instance, working from home, you walk just, 10 steps from your bed to your desk. So it's really like different, the amount of steps you would have to give to reach your office. Even if you use your car, still you would be walking more, even with the car, because you would have to walk to the car and then park the car, so it's really much more walking. So physical activity, social connection is also an element studied since these environmental enrichment studies until nowadays with human subjects as well. So opportunity for social connection is really a key element for cognitive health. And an element that we didn't give a lot of light, but I think it's important to just mark its importance, highlight its importance, is stress regulation. One of the greatest enemies of cognitive health is stress. So all the positive effects in terms of synaptic plasticity and neurogenesis that we have with physical activity, we have the opposite with chronic stress. So it's different from acute stress, but chronic stress, stress on the long term, it's really complicated for our brain to keep its cognitive health if you're facing stress on the long term, because it impairs neuron health, it impairs a lot of things. I won't list them because I don't want to make this about stress, but I just want to highlight the importance of stress regulation. So again, if we understand that, then all the design elements that we know can either increase stress, for instance, noise, discomfort, and many others, or unsafe perception of unsafety and so on. So if we can control these elements and work better, the ones that we know help to regulate stress, for instance, positive connection with nature, sleep, and so on, physical activity, again, it's another way for us to support cognitive health. Perfect. So I think...
So now
yes, go ahead.
Now that you've given that connection to mental health or cognitive health, what was your diet recommendation? Because a lot of people who are going to be watching this are working from home. So what is your spatial diet recommendation? I know you don't know everybody's, but in general, what are the key elements that you think about for helping somebody with their spatial diet who works from home, doesn't go out as much and all of that?
I think if we look back here to this list of elements, I think the first, before saying what is the diet I would recommend, I would try to understand the context of the person with these different behaviors or situations. So in terms
Mm-hmm.
of how many hours they sleep at night, what is the light of their room at night, or during the day, what kind of light they are exposed to, what kind of life habits. When you're in your free time, are you going to the park to run, or are you going to the shopping to watch a movie, or you're staying home watching Netflix? I don't know. So all these elements will help me understand what is lacking, even if you mentioned like it's a person who works from home. So I have an idea of what is lacking because you're not going to the office.
Right.
But still, there are so many, maybe you don't go to the office, but you get out every morning to run in the park. So, okay, so maybe physical activity is not an issue in your case, as it would be to someone that is working from home and is not practicing, I don't know, running in the park.
Mm-hmm.
If you're running in your treadmill, you're still running, so you're still practicing physical activity, but
Right.
you're lacking nature,
Yeah.
sunlight,
Right.
seeing people, novelty. So, okay, physical activity, maybe this I shouldn't worry so much because you're practicing it, but
Right.
it's still in a way that makes me pay more attention to other elements that are lacking.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we need to try to understand the system
Mm-hmm.
in which the person is inserted by looking at these different behaviors that are associated with cognitive health.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can see what is lacking,
Yeah.
what is under control,
Mm-hmm.
and we start working with what is lacking. And
Mm-hmm.
we ask ourselves, can we, through the space is it the home I am designing? Or is it, I don't know, maybe even a restaurant can play a very important role, for instance, for a person who works from home.
Mm-hmm.
Because then you have a very imbalanced diet because you're staying a lot of time in your home. But the only moment you leave your home is to have lunch because you don't like to cook. And then
Yeah.
you go to this restaurant.
Yeah.
So this restaurant plays a very important role in terms
Yeah.
of offering novelty, opportunities for social connection.
Mm-hmm.
So if I am designing our home, it's interesting for me to understand these kind of behaviors. But if I am designing the restaurant, it's even more interesting to understand the role of this restaurant to some of its users. Of course, I cannot understand everyone. But if I understand that some people will use this restaurant at this kind of as part of this kind of system, I'm like, okay, so it's a great opportunity for this restaurant to help balance this spatial diet that is in balance. So what can I offer in this restaurant to improve contact with nature, or maybe opportunities for social interaction? I don't know. So I think it's great. I don't have a special diet to recommend if I don't know these differences in behaviors. But the key is always to really try as much as possible. If you're designing a home, it's much easier because then you have only just a few users, like one person or just a family. It's much easier. When you're designing a restaurant, a school, it's much harder, but still we can do research with a few users. And we can think of design methodologies involving personas, user journey, for instance, that allow us to understand these different experiences that people have in this space to offer a more balanced diet with the design solution that we will develop. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, so it sounds like this image here is basically a framework to start with when we think about cognitive health. And it's complex systems, which I love. And so there's a deep ask of the person to be able to articulate and communicate, because the designer can say, look, I know how to deal with these things, but I need you to tell me. I can't, know everything about your life. You need to tell. So there's a part of the individual who has to be introspective, think about how they feel on the inside. For example, like lighting in the bathroom at night, like they need to be able to say, this actually bothers me at night, this particular light. And then also be honest with themselves about all of these different elements, because if they can't do that with you, then it's kind of hard for you to properly give them the diet. But ultimately, I think you explaining how the built environment can help in each one of these things can help the user, or the person rather, understand better.
Yes, yes. And I think you touched on some key points. So I think uh, informing the user is a key point of spatial design that usually we don't pay attention to. We pay attention
Right.
to creating the environment and offering the most perfect one that we can, but not informing the user about the reason behind some design choices, which involve, for instance, supporting cognitive health. So I
Right.
think informing the user is a key element. And then you mentioned, okay, so the user needs to be aware of how this light in the bathroom at night bothers him or something. But I think most of the times they won't be aware of some things, but during briefing sessions in which we are interviewing the users or the clients, I think we can use some kinds of questions or other methods, not only a direct question, that helps us understand more about their experience. If you ask directly, do you like it or not? Maybe you won't get the richest possible
Right.
answer, but
Right.
maybe you can show images of different bathroom lights at night, and he will show you that he preferred one that is completely different from the one he had. So you know that maybe he didn't like, or he was not aware, but he would
Mm-hmm.
prefer this one. And
Mm.
also because you know what we need in terms of light at night, you will make a better choice, even if the client or the
Yeah.
user is not able to inform you. So we have to inform the user not only about the whys of some of our design propositions. We are proposing,
Mm-hmm.
he can agree or disagree, but if we inform the whys, he
Right.
can make a better decision, he or she, they can make a better decision, like, oh yeah, so you do it as you designed, or no, do it as I say, it's my home, I prefer it like this. But at least you're making a more conscious decision, more
Got it.
aware of what what it means to
Hmm.
change the light or the furniture or the color or something.
That's great. Thank you so much. I get it.
Yeah, and it's just like as a nutritionist, they will not just give you the diet like written in a paper. They will usually really explain to you like, oh, but this one is in the morning, and it's because this will help you with that. That is your goal or your
Mm-hmm.
health. So it really is more. There is a lot of information
Got it.
usually shared. So yes, I think that's a key element, sharing information. It was the last one. I just wanted to say thank you and share my email if anyone wants to ask something, if anything was unclear, or if insights came up and you want to share. I'm really open to exchanging information. I also invite everyone to follow us on Instagram. We usually share a lot of content through Instagram. We have a huge community there. And I wanted to thank you, Lydia, for this opportunity. It was really, really a pleasure to talk to you. I love your energy.
Thank you. I so appreciate your focus on cognitive health because I think more and more people are going to realize how important it is. But most importantly, I think that what you're doing is helping raise awareness that our environment is not just something that's there. It's actually something that feeds. Like you said, we have a relationship with it. And the moment we realize that, then we can be more proactive about it and exercise self-determination in how we want that environment to enable us or foster the things that we want, our goals and our dreams. So thank you so much.
Thank you.